So to be different and shake things up, how it works is we have a 6-minute intervention from the kickoff speaker, in this case Žiga Turk down here. Then we have 3 minutes each. Oh, sir, there we are. There we are, perfect. I've got my giant alarm clock. It's the best accessory a moderator can have. 3 minutes per intervention. You will see, if you get to the end of your time, here's this flashing screen here, and you get a little battery-style warning that runs up beforehand. And of course, if you talk for too long, then you might hear a scary noise, or you might not. Exactly. Behave yourselves. There's a live stream. This is on Facebook Live. You can tune in from anywhere across the continent and beyond. There is also a Twitter hashtag, EIF16. So when our speakers say interesting, inspirational things that make you think, don't keep them to yourselves. Share them with the world. And over here, we've got Rafa Zanudo, our live cartoonist, who's going to come up with fun, creative drawings inspired by what our speakers are discussing today. So panel 2, tomorrow, how will we learn and be creative, covers a multitude of areas. The first panel was already very interested in skills, and I'm sure that these guys can go deeper into the detail. Our kickoff will come from Žiga Turk, who's professor at the University of Ljubljana and the former Minister of Education in Slovenia. We've got Kaja Kallas, MEP, who sits on the ITRE committee, very influential. Rodrigo, who's a member of the cabinet of Commission Navracsics, so deals with education along with culture, youth and sport. Miroslav Beblavý, who's had an attack of nerves and run away, but will hopefully be back in a moment, is Associate Senior Research Policy Fellow at CEPS, so it's a well-known think tank here in Brussels. Thomas Spiller is Vice President for Global Public Policy at the Walt Disney Company. You may have heard of them. And Ondrej Sočuvka is Public Policy Manager at Google. So without further ado, please kick us off.
Thank you very much. I'll start with a quote by the Nobel Prize winner Wassily Leontief. And he stated as early as 1983 that well before the internet, he said, "The role of humans as the most important factor of production is bound to diminish in the same way as the role of the horses in agricultural production was first diminished and then eliminated by the introduction of tractors." And the fancy term for this is machine-induced human redundancy. We are here today because we are afraid that we will go the way of the horses, and we hope in this particular session that creativity and education might prevent that. We hope that the answer to the accelerating technological change is better education, more creativity, so that we are the ones that are pushing the change faster, rather the ones that will be pushed by the change. And we have reasons for optimism because we are not like horses. There are two things that are different, at least two. First, we are flexible. There are many different things that we can do. Horses, not so many. We can learn, and therefore education is important, lifelong education. But machines too, robots too, artificial intelligence too can do many different things. But machines can also help a not so perfectly skilled human to do work she would alone be unable to do. So we need to learn man-machine teamwork. Secondly, humans are not just those who work, we are also the customer. We have demands, and this is a huge difference. Appreciating the local, the human, the particular, as good conservatives, creates more jobs than finding satisfaction in the material, in the global, and in the general. Demands are shaped by values and culture, and we need to learn about values and culture. We need to preserve that innate feeling that humans have that we like to deal with other humans. We need to shape, as Mr. Jurinda was saying earlier, shape character and not just educate. Currently, the school systems ignore or suppress what is making us human. We learn how to be like machines, we memorize facts, we learn recipes and formulas. This is, as Andreas Schleicher, who was quoted before from OECD, likes to point out, it's easy to teach, easy to test, easy to replicate by machines. Instead, learning should encourage what is uniquely human, like curiosity, creativity, empathy, and sense-making. Education will have to be less just in case, like in school, more just in time while working, less to serve machines and computers, more to control machines and program computers, less how to answer questions, more what questions to ask, less how to solve problems, more how to define problems, less how to obey decisions, more how to make decisions, less how to make stuff, more how to sell stuff, less machine skills, more people skills, less how to be smart, more how to be good, less how to treat people like objects, more how to treat people like humans. And this calls for a major overhaul of school curricula and pedagogy. But this will have an effect at best in 15 years. In addition, a major effort is required on all kinds of lifelong learning and opportunities for implementing creative ideas. States, governments should provide infrastructure for curiosity, creativity, and empathy, technological infrastructure, human-to-human networking, modernizing intellectual property right legislation, flexible employment mechanisms, social safety nets that will allow people to experiment with new business ideas. Innovation should be without permission. And states should have in place a responsive market economy that will recognize and reward winners of this coming great experimentation. It is not likely that politicians and civil servants will find a solution to the future of work, but somebody among the people will, as a provider and as a customer who has demands. The role of the state is to provide infrastructure for the generation of ideas and then recognize the winners. So to sum up, we should not be afraid of running out of work. We should not be afraid of going the way of the horses. We should be afraid of running out of how to be human, of running out of how to have good ideas, of running out of permissions to innovate, and of running out of having a fertile ground in which ideas can flourish. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor Turk. Lots of interesting things to get us started. I think maybe alongside hashtag EIF16, we could be tweeting hashtag I am not a horse. So perhaps we should come next to Kaja. Is the EU behind in placing technology at the forefront of educational creative activities, and what can you as legislators do to promote them?
Well, that's definitely a very difficult question. As the education is still member states' competence, but I think there were very many interesting points made in this opening speech, and what I also very much stress is that when we talk about digital skills, very much is talk about digital skills and how people should learn digital skills. Actually, it's not the digital skills that keep us the work and the jobs, but it's the human skills, as it was pointed out, because whatever the digital tools, the machines can do better, and of course we have to teach our children to be comfortable with the technology, so that they are not afraid of it and they are flexible. But that doesn't mean that we will teach them how to be machines, because eventually machines will win in that case. And then, of course, to talk about the human skills. So what are these? And what is the absurdity or the conflict is that when you look at the young people nowadays, and they are all, you know, in their iPads or their phones, but actually that what they really need is to communicate with each other. So actually put down the phone and look into the eyes and talk to each other, because these are the skills that we still need, and these are the skills that robots are not taking from us. So how to overcome this this conflict that there is, that more use of technology, being really flexible and comfortable with the technology, but at the same time not losing the skills that we really need. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and well within time as well, so gold star for you. Rodrigo, would you like to tell us a bit about the work of Commission Navracsics in terms of technology, education, culture?
Yes, many thanks for the invitation, first of all, and many thanks also for the introductory remarks. I mean, I found at least 5 or 6 keywords that are really at the core of the vision of Commissioner Navracsics here. He spoke about flexibility, also the local aspects, values, culture, long-term approach, things that are indeed very, very important. 4 points quickly, as we have only 3 minutes. First of all, let's focus as well. Let's not forget in our panorama, in our landscape, the basic skills. 2 days ago, the PISA results were published. So it's every 3 years, and it was 2 days ago. And we knew already that basically 1 in 5 Europeans cannot read and write properly. That we knew. What we learned 2 days ago is that actually it's getting worse. So the trend is not getting better. And that's something we have to be worried about, because first, if you don't have those skills, it means that basically this is a fast track for exclusion, and we know where exclusion can lead. Second, it means that you cannot build anything solid on that. And so it's also important, also this is a message for the public opinion, we do not only care about the high end of society, we not only care about providing the very, very good and excellent skills to the right companies in the right moment, but it's about providing really an inclusive education system. So basically quality education, fine, of course, for all. Please don't forget that, and this is actually also the text that the Commissioner presented yesterday, a brand new communication and education. Second point, teachers. We haven't spoken about them yet. We all know that if we don't do anything about it, we will always fail. This is like the main tool, the main leverage we have to really apply all these competencies. Today, it's not only that they are not well paid in most of the countries, that's actually not the main problem. The main problem is that in most of them, they lack totally the prestige and authority that they used to have. Nobody wants their kids to become teachers, for example. Well, where are we heading like that? So again, this is another message that must be taken into account. Third, and that was already, the point was already made, when we speak about skills, please, we have to define them in a very, very broad sense of the word. Skills means curiosity as well, as we said, creativity, team building, communication, speaking languages, being able to solve problems and things like that. Skills do not only mean like the technical skills that you need at a certain given time, because today it's impossible basically to anticipate them. So what the big companies want is people who are ready to learn and ready to adapt. So again, it's not an esoteric concept to speak about soft skills. It's really what the big employers want today. And just to say that basically we need maybe more in education, certainly an evolution, but we should also be aware of not creating a revolution. And that, I think, the ICT technologies is a very good example of it. We have excellent opportunities with ICT in education. We have to teach them better, and we have to use them better to teach other subjects. But please, let's do it in a smart way. We always speak about smart, smart, smart. Throwing tablets at schools to learn how to do a copy-paste from Wikipedia is counterproductive. It's not that it's useless, it's actually counterproductive. It can also kill the creativity of our pupils. And that's also, the industry is very aware of that. I mean, today, youngsters, the so-called digital natives, actually, they're not so native as we think. And so basically, they know how to, sending a selfie is not a skill that you can sell in your CV. And this is something also that needs to be reminded. So let's do it well, let's think a bit about it, and let's look for certainly an evolution, but we should also be aware a bit of revolutions. Many thanks.
Perfect. Lots to think about there. Very interesting what you say about teachers. And also this idea of the skills that we're training people for. And this picks up nicely on something Anne was saying in the first panel. We don't know what the jobs are going to be 20, 30 years from now. That's changed completely, so skills need to change completely too. Next, let's come to you, Miroslav. How much is technology really changing our approach to education?
Thank you. Well, besides working at CEPS, I'm also a member of parliament in Slovakia. And when the PISA results came out this week, Slovakia slid further for the 4th time in a row in its PISA rankings, which created, of course, quite a lot of anxiety. And, you know, the best cartoon I've seen about that was a cartoon of our current Minister of Education, who is saying in the cartoon, well, the future belongs to mindless, repetitive, and cheap machines, and that is what we are producing. And so, you know, that really, I think, should be a wake-up call to all of us, especially in Slovakia, but all across Europe. So how do we avoid that fate of being mindless, repetitive, and cheap machines? Well, what strikes me always is that everyone starts by saying that the future is unpredictable, and then they try to predict it, or even sell to the public that they can predict it to very tiny variations. And I don't think, you know, and people always look for safety in quantification. You know, if you have a number, it just feels somehow authoritative. But you know, our record of trying to predict actually the shape of future skills and jobs in terms of quantities is not very good. Even the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US, which does probably the most extensive exercises of this kind that I know of, when they retrospectively evaluate them, they all usually find that they have not been very good in predicting what types of jobs and what types of skills were needed even 10 years from now, not to mention 20 or 30. So what makes sense? I think rather than maybe trying to especially quantitatively predict what's going to be the world like in 10 years and how many carpenters will there be in Westphalia, we should try to understand what's happening, and that can inform us. For example, at CEPS, and you know, if I had more than 3 minutes, I could talk a lot about that. We try to use a lot of big data and understanding how the labor market is changing with regard to skills, and I'm happy to come back to that later, without trying to say that we know what's going to happen in the future precisely, but we try to understand the present. In terms of what's likely to be the future, let me just say that when we talk about the things like management of self, which I think is going to be the core of the education, you know, learning and adaptation, self-control, curiosity and creativity was already mentioned. So how to basically, you have to learn how to manage yourself to be an updatable, best performing machine there is. I don't actually think doing that is a lot different from what the best schools are already doing today. So I don't think it's so much that the technology of education will change so completely. What I think we are going to see is increasing pressure that the bulk of the education system joins those who are best performing. So, you know, William Gibson, the writer, said that future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. So I think if you travel around the world today and look to the best schools, I think you will find what the good schools and the average schools might look like, hopefully, if we're successful in 20 and 30 years. And so that, given that it's 2 minutes and 55 seconds, is where I'm going to end this intervention. Thank you.
Perfect. That's absolutely fantastic. There we are. It's spot on. So from the selfie to management of self, we've got lots to talk about. Next, let's come to Thomas. For a company like Disney, is technology a game changer in your creative businesses? And how do you use that to offer consumers new experience?
Well, thanks. And thanks to the Martin Center. Last year it looked like a different setting. This year it kind of looks like the bridge of an Imperial cruiser in Star Wars. So, I feel at home, clearly. So yes, to the first question, technology will change the way we do business, obviously, and the way we deliver business. Obviously, think about our animated features. I mean, we more and more rely on extensive computing, but for us, the key question, and by the way, we are not in the education business per se. We are not, that's very clear. We are an entertainment company, but there is something very important that we touch billions of kids around the world, whatever their race, religion, or the country they live in. And kids are kids. I mean, there is a common trend about that. So what we do, though, is through our entertainment, through our programs, and I'll come back to that later on, but we share values. Values like, you know, friendship, courage, respect, adventure, sharing, and those values make, you know, as we just talked about, make kids better beings, or beings better able to understand the world they're going to live in. So that's one thing that we do, and that's very important. Having said that, we also, from a pure company perspective, looking at what skills we will need in the future, and obviously those computing skills will come very handy. But for us, the key, what we do on an everyday basis, is helping develop those soft skills that are so important for employers today. It doesn't mean that we don't discount hard skills like STEM, obviously, because when you create an animated feature, it takes years and real computing skills to do so. So one quick example, I mean, it's a little bit of self-promotion, but, and by the way, we focus a lot on girls, because we believe that when it comes to hard science, computing, and girls, there is a mismatch here. So we just launched, like a few days ago, actually, a coding, what we call Hour of Code. It's a global program, and it's based on Moana. Moana is on Latest Princess. Okay, so for those, go and watch Moana, by the way, it's very good. It's on latest princess movie. Anyway, it's ready to get girls aged 8 to 12 more into how they can code. This is free, this is online, this is global, and this is the kind of stuff that we can do. Of course, it's going to help ourselves in the future because we'll have a better pool of talents out there. But again, the very first thing I want to insist on are values. Because again, kids are kids. kids need to be treated that way around the world, whatever their race, religion, or country of origin. And that's what we do every day. It's about those values, the sense of sharing, sense of community. And I think it's one of those steps to go towards this new generation, because indeed they use a lot of devices, but how can they benefit from it as well? And how can they create stuff on their own based on what we as the Walt Disney Company put out there for them to play with? So I'll stop here.
Perfect.
It's flashing.
Lovely. But that's great. Education in the broadest sense, creativity, sharing, lots to think about there. So for the final set of opening remarks, let me come to Ondrej from Google. Obviously, your company also needs no introduction. Where do you see the biggest transformations coming in the educational and creative sphere?
So in my intervention, I want to follow up a little bit on Professor Žiga was saying in his introductory remarks, and I want to share with you 3 points, kind of 3 areas. 1, creative industry and its situation in Europe. 2, where is the situation coming from? And 3, what is the kind of conclusion, what we should or could do about it. So first point is creative industry in Europe is growing. This is, if we look at the Collecting Societies Group GESAC and their recent study on creating growth, measuring cultural and creative markets in the EU, they conclude that creative industry in Europe has continued to grow in terms of revenues and jobs despite the economic crisis. So this is just to start. What I want to add also from digital perspective is that the internet, that there were fears that internet in Europe would create a culture of free that would destroy the creative industries. And actually it has not been confirmed. If we look at the consumer spending in the last 10 years, the consumer spending has increased by 25%. So second point I want to mention is where is this growth coming from? And why is this an important question? It is an important question for Europe, because if we understand where the growth is coming from, we can also smartly decide where we want to invest our attention and focus so that we can make Europe be successful in the 10 years to come. And so, unsurprisingly, the growth comes from digital and the transition and transformation that it brings. So if you look at growth in revenues, the growth in revenues, according to PwC, was 22 billion euro over the past decade. So the revenues of collecting societies are growing, revenues for television are steady at a good state, and revenues for the music industry are picking up, thanks also to some kind of a new amazing digital innovation, such as, for example, amazing European streaming service Spotify. Growth in jobs. So we sometimes tend to think about creative industries and jobs in a very, very narrow way, but there are branches of new jobs which are created thanks to this connection of creativity and digital. Let's look at web design, social media creativity, technology developers. According to Ernst & Young and Collective Society reports, there is currently 3.3% of EU working population employed in the creative industries, and these creative industries create 7.1 million direct jobs. So these are quite impressive numbers. And what is very important to mention here is that there are some types of jobs which never existed. One example, app developers. Imagine you are a mobile app developer. You have to code, you have to create a design, you have to use your creativity. According to App Developer Alliance, there is 1 million jobs created by EU mobile app economy in 2013, and there are estimations that up to 5 million of these jobs will be created until 2018. So we have asked the question, what is the situation of creativity in Europe? We have asked the question, where the growth come from? And now, last point is, what do we do about it? Creative sector, per se, needs both the creative, rich content, but also the digital part, the digital innovation. And I believe this is where this is a growth engine for cultural and creative industries in Europe. When we look at the benefits, it's of course revenues, it's jobs, it's lower barriers to entry, lower distribution costs, talent discovery, global promotion, and even such important things as fight against piracy, or new data-driven creativity, which we are starting to understand a little bit. So my concluding remark is that change is part of the history. And Europe has been very good historically in handling the change. If we look in Europe, if we look at the example of phonograph, an example where my colleague came up with, With the invention of phonograph, later called gramophone, that was a big change in music industry. And of course, there was a lot of unhappiness and a lot of kind of nervousness. It upset some people. But fast forward, and we see that this technological innovation basically created a completely new industry, a recording industry. And more than that, more than the discovery of the business model, this invention has also created a new cultural dynamics, which is that we actually, up to today, we listen to the songs which are 3 to 5 minutes long. That comes from the invention of the phonograph. So, conclusion, Europe has been very good in handling the innovation historically. And the process of reinventing the creativity and digital in today's times is very, very important, not just because we want to reinvent the business model, how to make the money, how to monetize the content, but most importantly, and this is what we all should be discussing, how can we create new products, new services, new media that people love, are passionate about, and want to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ondrej. I'm sure you saw the screen flashing, blue and yellow, but maybe we should get red and green there too, so it was the Google colours, and then you'd have...
sorry, got confused.
Been alerted, don't worry. So I'm delighted as a moderator to see I already have one hand up. Kaja, you want to come back on something?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on several things. There was a talk about PISA test, and now I'm also putting my other hat on, and I'm coming from Estonia, so we actually were quite happy about the results, because we were the 5th in the world and also the 1st in Europe regarding the STEM subjects. And that also, how we have achieved that is relating to what you said also about the characters and everything, the values that the cartoons play here. So the STEM subjects, they are considered to be difficult and more complex. And how you can't just tell children that learn this because this is useful. So what you do, you make this fun, and then they like it. And we also have in Estonia, the most popular cartoon character is actually a dog, a girl dog, who is creator, and there's a musical about her, and all the songs are about math is good and chemistry is fine, and it's like it's starting from really early age that the children, they really it's their interest to deal with these issues. And then we move to the primary school, where you have coding in elementary school, because it's actually fun. It's a game. So it is easier to do this that way. What comes to the teachers, of course, that's the biggest issue. And some teachers in Estonia have complained that they have to show all the digital tools that they use in their subjects, whatever the subject is, even if it is physical education, or like you have to show something that you can also relate and how these things do work. And then one biology teacher actually was complaining to me that said that, you know, I have had to report how many times I've used digital tools in the last year, but nobody has asked me how many times I took the children to the nature, and I'm teaching biology. So that's also, you have to have this balance there. But considering the skills that are needed, all the teamwork and creativity, and so the teacher's role is totally different, and how to make the teachers understand and to take up the new way that they will only speak in the class for 20% of the time, and most of the time there are debates, there are group work and such things. It's of course much more difficult to implement, but we have to do that.
Perfect. Lots to think about there. And like you say, it's much more than just putting a tablet in children's hands and saying, ta-da, we've digitized education. Miroslav.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on that. First of all, I really want to salute Estonia, because it's impressive not just for its absolute results, but it's impressive because it combines them with a high level of inequality and child poverty. And that's a challenge that other countries find very difficult to deal with, is that if you have a lot of inequality in society and still you get really high results for everyone, you know, it's much more difficult challenge than to be Finland, where you have much more homogeneity. So I just want to salute Estonia on that, and it can really teach other countries with similar problems, maybe more than some of the other usual trailblazers. But now to come to also where I think I might disagree a bit, or well, actually not with Kaja, but with the general climate, which is that there is this emphasis on technology and apps and digital boards and games and everything. And what we are finding is that actually that can be really distracting to good education, and it can actually be value deducing, especially if it's a hype that takes away attention from real improvements in the education. So it's really the teacher's quality that matters, and it's what the teachers know and don't know that still continues to matter. And I'm reminded there, Slovakia actually also has quite good results on the hard sciences, but we tend to score very poorly on reading comprehension in PISA. So basically being able to read and really understand what's written and critically assess it. We are quite bad there as a nation. And one newspaper did an experiment where they actually took a question from that for the 15-year-olds and gave it to members of parliament who are in the education committee. and only one of them answered the question correctly of 10 people who were asked. And that's not to diss the education committee members, but that's just to show that, this is not a new problem. This is actually a problem that might have been even worse in the previous generation. Just no one cared because of the nature of the economy, and politics just didn't make it matter so much. But what that also points to is that it's likely that if you gave it to Slovak teachers, probably they would have the same problem. So if you want to change the reading comprehension of Slovak pupils, you need to change the reading comprehension of the Slovak teacher. And so all of that leads me that rather than the apps and the technology, we should be focusing on the teachers. And usually, if we are not achieving something, we can trace that back to what the teachers are lacking. And I don't like the discussion of blame and fault, which is quite frequently present in the political discourse. This is not to blame teachers for anything, it's just to say what we have to focus on in getting the education systems up to speed.
Perfect. Let's think
Could
about.
I add one?
Oh, also keen. Perfect. Go on, Rodrigo, very quickly. Oh, go on, Thomas. You're being too polite. All right, Thomas first.
Okay. Well, I agree with that. And that's why, as far as we are concerned, I mentioned at the beginning that we are not in the education business. We are a company, but I think it's a great add-on. And let me give you two very quick examples. One is on the more traditional skills, and the other one is on this digital thing. In the US, and it's coming to Europe now, we have a thing called musicals in school. So we take a school, and then we tell them, look, for 1 year, you are going to build a musical on your own. We provide you with the decor and the costume and stuff, but it's up to the kids and the teachers, actually, to decide how they want to do it, the rhythm how they want to do it, the pace and the type of skill that they need to make it happen. And then after 1 year, they show it to the parents, and that's it. So it's really to help this kind of community sharing, but it's in addition to the normal curriculum. It doesn't replace it. So I just want to make that point very clear. And the second thing, because you said, and I'm very sad that this little dog in Estonia is not a Disney product, but that's okay. Maybe we needed to think about an acquisition here. But the point is that you need to make it interesting and fun for the kids, otherwise it's hard to relate. When you go into school and you have a blackboard, and then you have all those distractions on the side, which are pretty cool and fun, how you can reconnect the two. And I'm sorry, again, it's like self-serving a little bit, but we have this thing called Pixar in a box. The Pixar products are loved by kids all over the world. So we help them online. It's a free program. They can deconstruct and reconstruct a Pixar animated feature, but it forces them to use math skills, computing skills, science skills, because it's about how you move a fireworks through a screen. It sounds easy. It's not easy at all. So it's a kind of stuff, and it's fun, it's interactive.
Not easy for you.
Well, for me, it's a disaster, actually, personally. But it forces kids to go through the extra mile. But again, very important, it does not replace the traditional curriculum. It's not, and that thing, I think companies like us have this responsibility, but we need not to compete with the traditional system. It's en plus.
Yeah. This is interesting. It brings back the bigger picture of the whole internet thing, which is sharing and transparency. The Times in the UK has a platform for teachers to share their lesson plans. My best friend's a teacher, and she put up her Alice in Wonderland plan. But you can also rate them. So again, it's this thing of how do your peers view your work? It's bringing whole new aspects to it that simply didn't exist a while ago. Rodrigo, you wanted to come in?
Yes, I wanted also to react quickly to some of the other points. We spoke a lot as well here about digital skills, and we always tend to put it in the context of employability, which is absolutely fair enough because you need them actually for every job. Let's not forget that it's also important to give basic digital skills to everyone in society, because it's not only for your job, it's just, but today, basically, it's like literacy. If you cannot use a computer, again, you're just in the margins. And that's also another approach, is also to make sure that first we teach them in the long run. It was said in the introductory remark, education is not a good portfolio for a politician, because all the results you get in after 10 or 15 years. Let's think about the long term is very, very important. And also, let's do it well. I mean, digital skills, I mean, I see them a bit like learning English or French 70 or 80 years ago. It should be more or less like a language. It's actually closer to a language. Not everyone needs to speak it like Shakespeare. Those guys will go to work out of it, but everyone should basically master what happens behind the screen, in order not to be a passive consumer, but rather, really to be an empowered, like ICT user. And that's the challenge, and so that's why coding, programming, those things are very, very important, and again, to start early. The private sector has a role to play there. They actually do fantastic programs already in many, many schools. Thank God, this stereotype about, you private sector, hands off from my education system is slowly, slowly erased in every country, so that's less and less a political problem, and that's good news indeed. Teachers, yes, just to give you a figure again, that just shows that it's not only about salary, it's mostly the working conditions, and again, and I think here in the conservative think tank we can say it, prestige and authority of teachers. Today, a Finnish teacher, which is a bit like the model at world scale, at the beginning of his career makes less money, is less paid than a Spanish teacher, for example. Although it's a bit more expensive also to live in Helsinki. So just to give an example, and what makes the difference there, first their autonomy, their excellence of their training, and third as well that, again, they are role models. I mean, it's fancy for, to have a daughter-in-law or son-in-law who is a teacher. And then we should also think about the role models. You mentioned this little dog, that's very, very good, because again, I was unaware of that before I started the job, but indeed, even the ICT sector has not such a good reputation among the youngsters. I really thought that everyone wanted to become the new tycoon of Silicon Valley and be a billionaire before he's 35. It seems that when we speak to the big players, it's not the case, and they really, really struggle to find the right people, and among other things, because ICT professionals are still seen as geeks, which is pretty unfair. STEM in general are seen as very, very boring disciplines. And then the question is, okay, what role models our kids have today? And well, this may be also one question that we should put on the table, but if we are just raising them in the glory of becoming a football player, or a very poor artist only with a microphone but no voice, or only a model, not a role model, but a top model, maybe we are not going the right way there. So to promote that, and again, to fight against the prejudices, and to also lead them a bit towards excellency is definitely part of the answer, because what we shouldn't fall here, the trap we should avoid is like basically the type of either-or type of discussion. Education, is it to become employable or to become a good citizen? Is it only for excellency, or is rather mediocrity for all? Is it either-or? No. Those are things that's obsolete, basically. And Estonia is indeed a very good example of that. And Colombia is, Peru is, that was also in PISA. You can really, Vietnam, for example, you can also raise the level for everyone. So excellency is for all. It's not only for a happy few. And again, education, we all agree that it's a broad concept, and it's not either or. It's not to become a good worker or a good citizen. You either become both, they either give you both, or it's otherwise a very, very poor education system, basically.
Perfect. No, it's very interesting. And about autonomy of teachers as well, that's something governments kind of go back and forth on. Like, certainly having grown up in the UK, at one point it was like, yay, teachers, be creative, come up with your own lesson plans, do what you want. And then suddenly it's like the national curriculum, just ticking boxes. Is that the best way to teach young people? Possibly not. Ondrej, do you want to come in very quickly?
I want to have two quick comments. One is I recently read an excellent book by an American professor. The book's name is Deep Work. And the key argument of this book is that whoever wants to be successful, if we want our kids to raise them and be successful and prepared for what is coming, we don't know what is coming, they need to have two components, focus and excellence. So actually this is to repeat and basically confirm that I think technology is not the ultimate objective. The technology is a tool that can be very useful, but in the end, if we lose the habit of focusing, and if we don't teach this habit, and if we don't teach whatever field, whether it's somebody in the supermarket or somebody in the amazing think tank, if we don't teach the skill of being excellent, whatever we do, I think those are the skills. So I just want to quote this one book. And the second point, I want to challenge everybody here a little bit. As a happy father of, and proud and blessed father of 2 little daughters, an amazing wife, I wanted to say that I think we speak a lot about teachers, but I think actually the first habits how to use technology come from parents. The fact whether you come home and you give your child a tablet, or whether you take a tablet and you read something together with the kid, or you give it a book and you read. So I think actually we speak a lot about teachers, and it's fair and it's very, very important, but I also think that even before teachers come on scene, it's role of parents to actually show how technology can, be a useful tool and not just a wasting time or a social networking tool.
Perfect. Now, before we open it up to questions from the floor, Kaja.
Yes, I wanted to pick up on that point, focus and excellence. And actually, then when you think about internet, there's also a good book written about Nicholas Carr, The Shallows, which talks about how internet intervenes and actually makes our memory worse, makes our concentration worse, and maybe it doesn't affect us that much because we already, have our long-term memory and everything is developed, but it definitely makes a difference for the kids. And then there's a question that I'm sometimes I've asked that whether there should be a Wi-Fi in the schools and whether this shows that, they are doing so well because they have Wi-Fi, but actually maybe it's not a good thing at all because, this interrupts all the time and then the children don't actually create the skills of focusing, which is what they need eventually. And one other point about those people who have worse or don't have that good digital skills. There was a study showing that 49% of people actually have low digital skills. But what was also interesting, we did a study in Estonia about this, and the lowest skilled people are actually the ones who don't want their skills to be developed. Like we asked the question whether you feel comfortable in digital sphere. I don't. Whether you want training or education. No, I don't. So how to make those people, and I'm not talking about children, but elderly people who need also to bridge the gap. So how to make them to take up those things is a question.
Absolutely. One of my first jobs was a PA to a team of engineers, and the big boss didn't want to learn to use email. He would just get me to write his emails. I was like, I can teach you. Microsoft Outlook, really handy, but he just didn't want to know. He was much happier just doing his engineering. Miroslav, very quickly.
Very briefly, I just want to say that I think we're going to have a debate about approach to sort of ICT and technology in schools similar to the one we don't have, but we have implicitly on alcohol and teenagers. When I was a teenager, I spent quite a lot of time in the US, and what was really surprising for me was the very different cultural approach to alcohol and teenagers, where in Europe it was taken for granted that you adjust gradually, so you can get the sip here or sip there, or you can go to a party, and unless you overdo it, no one makes too much fuss about it. Whereas in the US, there was this very strong cultural imperative that if you drink until you're 21, heaven is falling down. And as a European, I didn't think that was very good because I could see the students coming into the university binge drinking once they were outside of their parents' watch list. But that was my European bias. I mean, I'm sure the Americans will have the opposite one. But I think that's a discussion we should have for technology as well. Should we shut down some aspects of it out of school for that very sensitive period when all of this is forming, or should we actually emerge gradually? And that's not a discussion I've been seeing. I mean, there's a lot of sort of catastrophic predictions, but not much discussion about what it actually means for the pedagogy.
Yeah, no, there's a huge debate to be had there, which risks going off on a whole tangent. But yeah, no, my friends with children are like, we're not putting them on Facebook, it's their own decision when they're 12. But some of them are like, here's your embarrassing baby pictures right now in real time. Right, any hands going up for questions? Anybody keen to I have to say the panelists are doing an excellent job just on their own, Rodrigo.
Right there.
Oh, perfect. We've got one in the corner here. So, yeah, question means question, not statement. So keep it brief and tell us who you are and who you represent.
Hello. Yeah. My name is Herman Holland, the founder of the think tank Skaperkraft in Oslo, Norway. And I have a question for the politicians here. Research shows that if you are introduced to entrepreneurship during your educational years, there's a greater chance you'll start a company, and that's a skill we desperately need. In Norway, only 1.4% of students are encountering that at universities. How do we actually see entrepreneurship really in maths introduced to universities in Europe?
Great. Rodrigo, do you want to go first on that one?
Yes, please, because every time I hear the word entrepreneurship, I feel obliged to answer and to jump. Why? Because it's basically the main deliverable that the commissioner will make in 2017. So, recommendation to member states, which in the field of education is basically the nuclear weapon. We don't have anything more powerful than that from the EU, on teaching entrepreneurship at all levels of education, so not only universities, but also starting early. The secret is a bit to start early, precisely because I think if we want also to capture a bit what we said today, is not only about changing the aptitudes of the children, is rather the attitudes. And if you want, for example, these horizontal skills, you want to be creative, you want to be able to work in a team, to learn to fail and all those things, you can capture almost all of them in teaching entrepreneurship. It's a very consensual issue. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. You have already recipes on the ground. We are already, for example, funding excellent programs through Erasmus+, like mini companies in schools. Pas mal, excusez du peu. It's really, really very interesting. The idea of the commissioner is not reinvent the wheel, it's just to improve the critical mass. You said 1.4. In some other countries, it's higher than that. In some others, it's even lower. But the idea is to make sure that everyone before 18 has been exposed at least once in his life to an entrepreneurial experience, which can be, I don't know, the local entrepreneur coming only one day to school, or the school going to the enterprise. But of course, it can be much more elaborated than that, so up to a one-year mini company, where basically in September, you're supposed to have an idea, and in May, you're supposed to sell it somewhere. That exists. I mean, there's a vibrant civil society in this field. And again, I mean, normally around July, we should be able to propose something very, very concrete on that, with the aim, again, to not reinvent the wheel, but to make it roll. So, good news.
Perfect. Thomas, you're not a politician, but give us an answer.
I can if you want me to. I just want... I tend to be quite critical of the Commission lots of the time, but on this one, I want to, look, and for my friend from different companies, look at what the Commission is proposing on the volunteer car, which has been announced 2 days ago, right? It's very interesting. Think about the Peace Corps in the US type of initiative that can really, all of us, we can take young adults, young teenagers into, and give them a chance to see what's happening on the ground in companies for very specific projects with a social angle, think also like sports, people with disabilities, minorities, and things like this. It's a great initiative, and as Disney, we're going to look into it because we think it's practical, it's real, and that can complement skills that those people already have, and then can develop some entrepreneurship skills through the course of the process. So well done, guys.
I would just add one thing, that of course all the programs and things are very nice, but it all comes down to the teachers. So if the teacher has got no experience in entrepreneurship and actually is maybe even of the thinking that entrepreneurs are maybe not that good people, and especially when you talk about entrepreneurship, then we also should talk about failing. And when you think about education, then our education system is very much built on you can't fail. You can't really fail, you have to learn your things and do your things and not fail, because if you fail, you fail. But in the entrepreneurship, you have to also embrace failing. So I think that's the biggest question. So how to do it? What we have done in Estonia, we try to bring the actual entrepreneurs to teach entrepreneurship, because if it is just a program in the curricula that is taught by a teacher who is doing physical education otherwise and just doing this, then it just doesn't work. It has to be inspirational. It has to be from a real world, really.
Perfect. So I should point out at this point that we are in fact trending on Twitter. So well done everybody for getting involved. It's hashtag EIF16. So do carry on sharing your thoughts. Can I see any more questions?
There
Perfect. Joanna, you want? Oh, great. In fact, if we even take two, and then we can group them together and tackle them in a group.
Thank you very much, Mohammed Rajai Barakat. I agree with what you said now, because the values, you speak about values, sharing, and the values of community. I don't think that is true. Our youngs now, the first value, especially those who are interested by economy, the most important value is not to be a loser. And students who are studying in Solve, in economic schools here in Belgium or in Europe generally, they teach them how not to lose, how to make your money more and more, how to do to have more, to be more concurrent in the market, and all these things. And even youngs now, for teachers lost their role. If you make a comparison between the role of teachers 20 years ago and now, even families, parents, they can do nothing with their children. Parents don't have enough information about technology. When the child is 5 years old and he has his iPhone and all these new eyes, as I call them, you know, nobody can face this important dangers. I think it's dangerous for our society to continue like this. And for industry and you know, if you phone tomorrow, because we are speaking about jobs, try to phone to Belgacom and ask them to help you because you have a problem with your team.
Done that.
When are you going to? Sometimes I speak with someone who is in Morocco. I speak with him in Arabic, and other time maybe in India, and many times maybe in prisons in USA. And what is jobs? Which jobs you are creating with this technology? I think that we have to stop this evolution because 20 years ago, I remember when we used to say that if we continue like this, everybody is going to be without employment. And it's true now. Thank you very much.
Great, so thank you so much. Before we come to this next question, Professor Turk quickly is going to...
Just a short note or maybe a reminder, it was said before. People who are 25 today will be in the workforce probably for the next 50 years. The education that most of the discussion is about, the school education, will not affect them. So I would ask the audience and the panel to spend a little bit more time of the people who are in the workforce today and will be for some time and will have to adapt because the world is changing. It's not waiting for kids to come out of school.
Perfect, thank you so much. And then we have another question. Oh, we'll do at the back first. All right, okay. Great.
Hello, my name is Kaja Munoz. And I have shifted, allow me to talk a little bit about myself. I shifted my career from logistics to more digital, partially because I was in a coding bootcamp. And derived from that, we're also working on some initiatives to bring the elements of digital innovation, especially to communities or groups which are not normally the target, meaning in the context of Belgium, people who won't speak English, French or Dutch, for instance, or people who have another age that are older and may be difficult. For instance, particularly in the case of Brussels, there have been scholarships given to Syrian refugees to join coding bootcamps. So there are many initiatives around innovation, and I'll be interested to see how are they also targeting these groups or minorities which are now part of our society, and sometimes we don't realize that.
Brilliant, that is a great question, thank you so much. And I can see time ticking on, so actually we'll take this one now too, and then do all the questions in a big group.
Thank you very much. My name is Maria, and I have just started my own company, NationCraft it's called. And I think what I would like to ask, which is very much connected to the previous panel, and that is a question of mobility. What do you do as companies and certainly public institutions to create a lot larger mobility? We see it in the US, going from a public to private spheres, from innovators to others. And personally, I learned a lot being in big institutions, which I'm making use of being an independent. And I can assure that people in the big institutions would learn one hell of a lot to get out in reality and have a little bit of a value on themselves. What can you do and what can you not do? I very much believe the same counts for education. I've had the privilege of my children being in a British educational system and a French-based system, and now my son is in a Danish system. So it's gone through sort of various ways of thinking and others. And that, I personally believe, is his biggest benefit. Having tried these various things, taking the best of each of them. I know that's a bit much to ask for a national educational system, that you have to provide everything. But again, it's this concept of mobility, being a bit more open, being a bit more flexible. But it is not very easy. And I can assure a lot of my former colleagues feel exceedingly provoked by the fact that I've gone independent and find it's very dangerous to work with, and how can you do this? Because you offer foreign policy in a completely different manner. How do we support this? How do we take it further? And I found it also interesting, your previous panel was about independent workers. All of them, except one, were in stable institutions. That was quite a point.
Perfect. Maria, thank you so much. So actually, I think these questions form a theme really nicely together. So first of all, we have a nightmare scenario where the entire internet, nay, the entire world, is at the level of Belgacom customer service. I think we can all agree that's not somewhere we want to be. But these all come down to the same thing, right? Transitions. How do you get women? How do you get older people? How do you get minority groups included in coding? And then once you've given people these skills to set up as an independent, how do you ensure that these skills are portable, that they're mobile, that there's a system to back them up? So those were three quite diverse questions with a common theme running through them, and I'm sure that we can all have a go at them in time. Who's brave enough to want to go first? Miroslav.
Thank you. I think the first intervention was an encapsulation of the take, back, control narrative that won the Brexit, and if it continues in this vein, I think we can accept a lot of other exits in the future, because that perception is now widespread. But coming back to these issues of mobility and education, first of all, let me just refer briefly back to the issue of incentives, because a few years ago we did a research where we looked at why are so many young people not studying STEM, and that's usually taken as a myopia, that these are all these well-paid jobs in STEM, and people are still not studying them and want to be lawyers and economists and artists. So we actually took data and looked at both costs and benefits of particular types of education in 5 countries, including the time you have to spend on them, et cetera, et cetera. And what we actually found was that people were doing quite rational decisions, that if you take into account both costs and benefits of these careers, then actually the STEM careers were not so rewarding, particularly for women. Because to study STEM is extremely demanding in terms of the number of years, the number of hours you have to spend on it, and especially women actually don't get as much financial rewards out of that on average in these countries that we looked at in Europe. So our conclusion was that rather than just breaking down the cultural barrier to girls learning math, we should be also working on how to make sure that women can make the same amount of money in the workplace on STEM, and then maybe more of them will actually study for it. So that's my first point. And the second point I want to make is about this mobility. And it's interesting how mobility is interpreted, because you mentioned US as a role model, and US is truly a role model. Well, you said how people are moving around, but US is a role model in terms of sector mobility. So people really move around a lot in sectors, but it's really not a role model in what I would call a class mobility. So, actually the social mobility in the US is lower than in many countries of Europe, even though the Americans don't like to hear that. And so the question for us, I think, is how can we actually promote mobility across social classes and across types of professions? Because even when you look at these programs that try to promote retraining, and here I go to Professor Turk and what he said about need to think about adults rather than just the kids, and I agree with that fully. One of the biggest problems we have is that actually we do these kind of things like minors to coders initiatives only on a minor scale. because it's very difficult and we don't have a very good track record of succeeding. So we actually only usually open for adults the kinds of skills that are usually close to what they're already doing, which in one way makes sense, but on the other hand prevents the real mobility. So the question for me is how, I agree with you, how can we promote mobility, but especially how can we promote mobility between very different classes and occupations, because I think that's in this new economy becoming sort of more and more frozen. And I would, as the last, would relate to what Kala was saying about the fact that so many people just don't want to move into this, and they are being left behind. And I think that's being one of the biggest challenges we're facing on this front.
Great. And also, I'm a big fan of the internet as a tool of social mobility because, of course, nobody knows who's behind the screen. Now, there are pluses and minuses to that, but you certainly break down a lot of prejudice in that way. Ondrej, do you want to go next?
So I will. I wanted to offer two quick comments. One is that I think digital is not an industry per se. Everything today is digital, and we cannot afford our kids not to have the basic skills needed to be prepared for the development that is coming. At the same time, we need to make sure we educate them to be ready to focus, to be excellent, to be creative. Do you know what is the favorite music of robots? Heavy metal. So one of the differentiating factors is whether robots can make a joke or not. So how can we make sure that our kids can make a joke? I think that's going to be very important. But again, I don't think we can afford not to have our kids and our younger generation to have the skills needed. The second point is, and here I want to echo something that Thomas has said, I think that we all have a different responsibility. So there is a responsibility of the elected politicians, there is a responsibility of think tankers, bright minds, and there is a responsibility of companies. So we don't pretend we know and we have answer to everything. We pick one area and we try to contribute. So, for example, we pledged publicly to provide 2 million digital skills trainings. And I'm very happy to confirm that last week we have met that threshold. So we trained 2 million people and young people, but also entrepreneurs with the digital skills. We pledged, for example, to provide 10,000 of scholarships to learn the coding and app developer together with Bertelsmann. So this is our way, and I would argue that technology is actually one of the best equalizers. So it doesn't matter what is your socio-economic background, what's your previous education, what's your status, you can access that kind of education wherever you are. So I wouldn't undermine this amazing phenomenal impact as opening the technology that opens the education and people can access it indifferently. And let me conclude with an example of how that not all of us can be actually coders or app developers. There's an amazing example of a UK startup called Fabulous Forever that was started by a lady, and she basically has a line of cosmetics for her clients, which are kind of middle-aged and older-age women who want still to be very, very beautiful. And she started being phenomenally successful, and actually she has customers in 24 countries. So she is not a code developer, she is not a technical expert, but her product is now available to 24 countries. And I think that that's an example how a traditional craftsmanship can combine and be boosted with the digital skills and technology that allows that.
Perfect. Now, I'd like the three panelists who haven't spoken yet to have a chance to come back on the questions and conclude a little before we go to Professor Turk for closing remarks. So let's go for Rodrigo next.
Yes, many thanks. Quickly and to the point, I'll try. When you speak about mobility, indeed, for me, mobility sounds obviously like Erasmus and transborder mobility. We are doing pretty well there. Everyone knows the program outside. It's one of the few brands that is really well known by everyone. And actually, it's indeed a key of the success, traveling, spending time abroad, not only for higher education students, also teachers, newly graduated, vet students, many other people, voluntaries, of course, is of importance. Mobility also means what you meant, basically, like to switch from one sector to the other. There, my answer is, well, this soft skill, flexibility and stuff, that's it's a change of attitude to for example, to think that maybe I'm not going to spend the next 30 years of my life in the Commission, for example. No? So that's an example. So that's a matter of attitude, and this is something that we need to interiorize. It's more a cultural change, if you want, to indeed switch from a one type of job career to several lives within your own career. That's a slow change. Huh? Nobody has a silver bullet for that. That's more for member states. And then again, that's more a social change, but that is coming, and I think you are a very good evidence of that. But the mobility that interests me the most is the one that you pointed out, is the social mobility. Education has been, for example, in France, it was very obvious, this ascenseur social, no? For 100 years, that's been really, really the meritocracy, the best way for people from disadvantaged backgrounds to really make, if they are talented, they will grow and they will scale up. And the problem is that this is no longer delivering this way. And it's true that we could also see in PISA, for example, that the migrant background has an influence. Huh? You know, so basically your score, you have more migrant of persons from a migrant origin among the lower achievers. So our integration machine, is it working? Obviously not as good as we would like to. And this is, again, nobody has a silver bullet for that, but it's at least at the center of our political policies and the messages that we give to the member states. So the social end, the quality education, but for all. It's even in the title of the document that we published yesterday. And I think this is, if I had to choose of one mobility that I should focus on, it would be definitely this one. This is becoming an urgency. And we can no longer afford to give this impression to the European Union that we only care about all these elitist techies that are going to end up in Silicon Valley. This is absolutely not the case, and it applies to entrepreneurship, by the way. Yeah? When you have the other day I could meet like a lady, an Afghan lady who has spent her life, you know, working for refugees in refugee camps, mostly in third countries. And she said, like, the best way of integration is actually to teach entrepreneurship, because it's much more, it's actually easier for a refugee to start its own business than to find a job, because he needs to get his diplomas recognized as that, and that doesn't work. Let's face it, it's a hassle, you know. And so that's basically the political priority now. On your question, Mr. Turk, I mean, for me, I have the impression, sadly, that the focus is on short-term approach and how to upskill people who within 6 months we can send to Samsung, Google, Cisco, and company. Fine, and that is part of the story of the skills agenda. But for me, it's really one chapter of a longer book. And so it's the first time actually here that everyone's focusing on schools, because normally they don't. And again, I think my concern is not to make sure only that we solve the problem of youth unemployment, but to also to make sure that it's going to be avoided in 10 to 15 years. Because if we start again in another generation because we didn't prepare them well, we are not on very good track. In any case, just to answer a bit more your question, of course, and again, yes, for those who are going still to work for 20 or 35 years of their life, I'm also one of them. Long life learning is the mantra, of course. Everybody agrees on that. It's very, very consensual. Then what is missing there, and we have clear targets at the European Union level there, and we are not yet there, is indeed that sometimes, especially at SME level, you know, it has not been understood how important it is to also give some credits and some time to your employees to also, you know, like form themselves. For teachers, it's absolutely obvious, but we're speaking here about everyone. And this is where, I mean, if I had to choose one way to improve that, it will be indeed like to change a bit the mentalities of the business, but not the big ones, to be honest, rather the at SME level. And that's it.
Perfect. So say, Rodrigo, you're flashing. Thomas.
Yeah, 3 points briefly. First, thanks to Miroslav for having pronounced the word frozen. By the way, it's under copyright, so be careful. But jokes aside, 3 things important. One is indeed training the parents. And there is one thing that we are doing and others are doing as well, of course, is make sure that the parents are not just afraid of going online, because the kids are anyway. So how do you make sure that actually parents understand what's going on there, how it works, and what can they do to make sure it's also safe for kids? So we do that because we have to, otherwise parents will just not understand of what kids are doing, and that, you know, accentuates this gap. So that's one thing. 2, I think it's also important to recognize that we need to allow kids to become who they want to be. And it's not only all to be coders or all to be fragrance and cosmetic entrepreneurs. I mean, it's great to be a cosmetic entrepreneur. It's also great to be, I don't know, a dancer or a carpenter. I mean, we need to also recognize that society is very diverse. Some kids will make it a certain way, and other kids will make it different ways, and that's okay. And we need also to pass those values to our children, that, you know, they need to be who they want to be as well. But we have as business, and I know that you're doing that too, we have a key responsibility is to be a role model. And that's why we, as Disney, we tend very much to focus on girls and minorities as role models, because we need to show those kids from all over the world that they too can make it. And by the way, an interesting fact, and it's not a Disney product, in the Gulf, I think it's in Abu Dhabi, there is a brand new cartoon character whose name escapes me, and now this product is sold all over the region, and it's a young boy from the Emirates, and he wants to be a scientist. And in a region which lags in terms of access to science and science development, it's very interesting that they are using animated feature, a little bit like the dog in Estonia, to actually promote science. And this little boy, his best friend is a girl, and she too wants to be a rocket scientist. So there is something, there is a trend here, because governments from all over the world recognize that's the one way, it's not the only way, but one way to push kids to pursue their dreams.
Perfect. Now, Kaja, very, very quickly before we come to Professor Turk.
Yes, about this stop evolution, I think this is very much showing the fears that there are, and this relates to the professor's question as well about the people that actually are already in the workforce and need to re-educate themselves and as I said, as the studies show, they don't really want to. Don't really want to. But why they don't want to, it's very much related to the fears. So what we have to do, you just can't say that don't be afraid. It just doesn't work, because fear is too strong emotion to just overcome like that. So we have to deal with the fears and try to take down the fears. And how you take down the fears is you show how things work. And maybe these things are not that complicated. What we have seen is that sometimes, people don't trust the digital technologies, but the trust goes up actually 80% the first time the people use them. And we have also trainings for elderly people to try to catch up with this. So I think this is the main point, and I'm not going into the future work and also digital dividends that I wanted to talk about, but I see your nervousness. So.
Yeah, exactly. We can talk about them all in the break, don't worry. No, but what you're saying is the opportunities are there, and you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Which brings us back onto you, Professor. Can we have 3 minutes of closing remarks, please?
Thank you so much. I was volunteered to do this summary, and it's almost impossible after such a fantastic discussion by the 5 panelists. I was trying to create a kind of word cloud of everything that was said and trying to summarize, and I managed to condense it to one sentence that will give me the structure of these closing remarks. And this one sentence is that teachers are heroes of digital future in which content is king. So teachers are heroes of digital future in which content is king. I'm very happy that teachers were mentioned. Actually, Rodrigo was bringing that up. And in fact, we need to reevaluate their position in society. When I was a Minister of Education in Slovenia, we have always in our minds the example of Finland. And I had some personal friends there, and we somehow knew that teaching, not only they have good teachers, but teaching profession is one of the most wanted and one of the most respected professions there. So I think everybody can learn from there and take us from there. Having said that, we will not only learn from teachers in the future. The teaching profession may go the way of taxi drivers, may go the way of Airbnb, etc. You will have to learn from many different people. Many different people will be teachers, and we need to learn how to teach, all of us, because we will be teaching somebody. Heroes, this is the key word from Thomas. We learn from movies. We have our heroes in life, in movies, in entrepreneurship, in business. And what you were bringing up is actually this whole idea of learning from areas where we used not to learn. Gamification, learning from games, will be an important item. And learning simply by doing. How many of us are reading instruction manuals for any kind of software that we deal with? Heroes of digital. There was a lot of discussion about digital, and we were trying to find this balance between being perplexed by digital, how fantastic that is, and having a sober look on that. And I very much like what Kaja Kallas was saying. We need to be comfortable with digital. We need to be comfortable with technology, as we need to be comfortable with English, as somebody was saying, but we are not all speaking fluently about that. Future. I think it was Miroslav who was saying that future, quoting that future is already here. Except, do we know where it is? Do we have systems? Do we have knowledge in place that can identify which elements are the future and which elements are the past? And finally, content. I was so happy to hear that what we all intuitively feel, that there is an explosion of content. We all know that it's an explosion of content, but it was good to hear that people are earning money on that, so that all that creativity actually pays. I'd like to conclude with what I was also saying in my introductory remark, that it's more important to state questions than to provide answers. And I think the key question here is this education and creativity that we've spoken about? Is it, as I think Rodrigo was saying, is it a nuclear weapon? Is it something that solves everything? Is it a panacea? Is it a silver bullet? Or are we maybe overestimating this? In a sense, we actually don't know what the future will be like, but, well, if you say more education, you can never be very much politically hurt about this. And this somehow reminds me on a guy I like to quote very often, Friedrich Hayek. He had this idea, or people in his time had this idea, well, if you just put the right people in the right place, everything will work. So if we just have the right people, well educated, with good skills, and put them in good places, everything will work. And of course, Hayek was critical of that. Hayek was saying, no, people are imperfect. They will not have the knowledge. They will not have the skills. They will not have the values. They will not be excellent. They will be lazy. And his response to that was, you must have institutions that make sure that imperfect people come up with good results. So to this question, is it a panacea or is it just some perplexion? I would offer this balance between, yes, we need to give people good education so that they can advance through society, etc., but we have to put in place institutions which will give them opportunities and which will bring the best to the top and which will identify those who are finding solutions to the problems that we have. With that, I would conclude.
Professor, thank you so much for a fantastic summary. You really brought the debate down, boiled it down to the basics, like the horses ended up, I guess. So that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much to my panelists. I guess we all need coffee now, so go out and enjoy some, and I will see you all back here at 12 to discuss how we build a long-term digital investment. Thanks.